Hey there, welcome to the Lean Startup audiobook. I'm really excited to dive into this with you because this book is a game changer for anyone looking to start a business, especially in today's fast-paced, ever-evolving world. So whether you're just starting out or you've already got a business in motion, trust me, there's a ton of valuable insight in here that you can apply right away. Now, this isn't just another how-to book about starting a business. It's about building something that truly lasts, that grows, and that's built on solid principles of learning and adapting quickly. We're going to cover everything from how to take a basic idea and shape it into something real, to testing those ideas with actual customers, and making sure you're building something people actually want. So, without further ado, let's jump in. Absolutely. Here's an expanded version of Chapter 1, Start from the Lean Startup. Keeping the tone conversational while diving deeper into the core ideas. This version aims to capture the spirit of experimentation, learning, and innovation, setting the stage for what's to come in the rest of the book. Chapter 1, Start. Every big success story begins somewhere. For most entrepreneurs, that somewhere is usually filled with excitement, a grand vision, and a burning desire to change the world. But let's be real, starting a business is hard. Really hard. And the truth is, most startups fail. The good news, they don't have to. In the Lean Startup, Eric Ries lays out a new approach to building startups, one that doesn't rely on luck, wild guesses, or years of endless hard work that leads nowhere. Instead, he introduces a framework that's focused on experimentation, learning, and adapting quickly. The goal isn't just to create a startup, it's to create a startup that can thrive, grow, and succeed in an uncertain world. But where does that journey begin? It begins with a mindset that embraces uncertainty, values learning over blindly following a business plan, and is always ready to change course based on what customers want. That's where we start. The myth of the perfect idea. Let's take a step back and talk about a common myth in the world of startups. The myth of the perfect idea. You've heard the stories, right? The brilliant entrepreneur who has this aha moment, an idea so perfect and so revolutionary that it seems destined to succeed. They lock themselves away, work tirelessly on bringing this idea to life, and finally launch it to the world, only to be met with applause, fame, and fortune. It sounds great, but that's not how it usually works. Most of the time, ideas don't work out the way we expect. The product we thought people would love turns out to be something they're not interested in. The grand vision that seems so clear in our heads hits roadblock after roadblock. Once we start trying to build it, that's not to say your ideas aren't important, they are. But what really matters is how you execute on those ideas and how quickly you can learn what's working and what isn't. That's where the Lean Startup approach comes in. The Lean Startup isn't about having the perfect idea from the start. It's about starting small, learning fast, and continuously adapting until you've built something people truly want. What is a startup, anyway? So, what exactly is a startup? Eric Ries defines a startup as a human institution, designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Notice that he doesn't say a startup is a new product or a new company. A startup is fundamentally about uncertainty. Whether you're launching the next big tech platform, opening a bakery, or creating a nonprofit, you're operating under conditions where the outcome is unknown. There's no blueprint for success. You can't just copy what someone else did and expect the same results. The road ahead is uncharted, and you have to navigate it carefully. The Lean Startup methodology is designed to help you thrive in this uncertainty. Instead of following a rigid plan, you follow a process of testing, learning, and iterating, what Ries calls the build, measure, learn feedback loop. This process allows you to learn from your customers, gather insights from real data, and adjust your product or business strategy as you go. It's not about being faster, it's about being smarter. It's about learning what your customers actually want before you spend too much time or money building the wrong thing. Why traditional business plans don't work for startups. Think about the traditional approach to starting a business. You write a detailed business plan, outlining everything from your product, features to your 5-year revenue projections. Then, you spend months, or even years, developing the perfect product behind closed doors, finally releasing it to the market with a grand launch, expecting customers to line up to buy it. But here's the thing, most business plans don't survive first contact with customers. You might think you know what people want, but until you actually put something in their hands and observe how they use it, you're operating on guesses. Ries argues that traditional business plans are based on assumptions about what your customers want, how much they'll pay, and how big the market is. And if those assumptions are wrong, your entire plan falls apart. In a world of uncertainty, detailed long-term planning doesn't make sense for startups. What you need instead is a process for learning and adapting. This is where the lean startup methodology comes in. It focuses on validated learning, what customers really want through experimentation, data, and real-world interactions. Instead of spending years developing the perfect product, you start by building a minimum viable product MVP, which is the simplest version of your product that allows you to test your assumptions. Then, you measure how customers respond, learn from that data, and decide what to do next. The goal is to minimize wasted time and resources by testing your assumptions early and often. If something isn't working, you can pivot before it's too late. If it is working, you can double down on what's working and scale up. The core principles of the lean startup. Now, let's break down the core principles of the lean startup. These principles form the foundation of the entire approach, so it's important to understand them before diving into the details. 1. Entrepreneurs are everywhere. You don't need to be working in a garage in Silicon Valley to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs exist in all kinds of industries and environments. Whether you're working on a tech startup, launching a new product inside a big corporation, or building a nonprofit, if you're creating something new under conditions of uncertainty, you're an entrepreneur. 2. Validated learning startups exist to learn how to build a sustainable business. This learning isn't abstract, it's about getting real data from real customers. Through continuous experimentation, you can validate or invalidate your assumptions about what customers want. 3. Build, measure, learn. This feedback loop is the heart of the lean startup methodology. You start by building a simple version of your product and MVP, then measure how customers respond, and learn from that feedback. Based on what you learn, you make adjustments, either tweaking your product, pivoting to a new strategy, or doubling down on what's working. 4. Innovation accounting. Instead of focusing on traditional business metrics, like revenue or profit from day one, lean startups focus on metrics that track progress toward validated learning. This helps startups stay focused on learning what works before scaling. These principles are designed to help entrepreneurs navigate the uncertainty and risk that come with launching something new. Instead of betting everything on one big idea, the lean startup approach encourages you to take small, controlled bets, experimenting, learning, and adjusting as you go, embracing failure as part of the process. One of the hardest parts of being an entrepreneur is dealing with failure. Let's be honest, nobody likes to fail. But here's the thing, failure is inevitable when you're doing something new. The key is to fail in small, manageable ways and to learn from those failures quickly. In the lean startup approach, failure isn't the end of the road. It's part of the process. If an experiment fails, that's valuable information. It tells you what doesn't work, and it helps you make better decisions moving forward. The important thing is to fail fast, fail cheap, and learn from every failure. Take Zappos, for example. Before becoming the billion-dollar company it is today, Zappos started as a simple experiment. The founders didn't go out and build a massive online infrastructure for selling shoes. Instead, they started by testing whether people would even be willing to buy shoes online. They took photos of shoes from local stores and listed them online. When a customer bought a pair, they would run out, buy the shoes from the store, and ship them to the customer. This small, low-cost experiment validated the idea that people would buy shoes online. From there, they could scale up. That's the lean startup way: test, learn, adjust. And if you fail, use that failure as a stepping stone toward success. Starting a business has always been risky, but it doesn't have to be a shot in the dark. With the lean startup approach, you have a method for reducing uncertainty, testing your assumptions, and learning quickly from real data. The journey won't be easy, but by embracing a mindset of experimentation and continuous learning, you can build something that people truly want. And that's what it's all about: creating a product, a business, or even a movement that has a real impact. So, as you begin your startup journey, remember, it's not about having the perfect idea. It's about starting, learning, and adapting. That's how you turn your vision into reality. Welcome to the Lean Startup. Chapter 2: Learn through validation. Now, this next chapter is all about learning through validation. You see, one of the key mistakes entrepreneurs make is assuming they know what customers want. They'll say things like, "This is the next big thing," or "Everyone's going to love it." But what if they're wrong? That's where the idea of validated learning comes in. Ries teaches us to treat every aspect of the startup, whether it's the product, the marketing, or the sales strategy, as a hypothesis. And the only way to prove that hypothesis is by getting feedback from real customers. Here's a quick example. Say you want to start a new app that helps people find local events. Instead of spending months building out all the features and then launching, Ries suggests creating a basic version of the app that only lists a few events. You then track how users interact with it, ask them for feedback, and learn what features they actually care about. Maybe users don't care about fancy filters. They just want a map. Or maybe they love notifications. You won't know until you test it in the real world. The lesson here: don't assume. Test, learn, and adjust. Chapter 3: Innovative Accounting. Alright, now, I know what you're thinking. Accounting. Ooh. But bear with me, because this concept of innovative accounting is pretty cool. Traditional accounting measures things like revenue, profit margins, and expenses. And yeah, those are important, but for a startup in its early stages, they don't tell the whole story. You might not even have revenue yet. So, Ries introduces this idea of tracking progress in a different way. Instead of focusing on profits, focus on learning milestones. Are you getting closer to finding a product market fit? Is your MVP resonating with users? These are the things that matter in the beginning. He recommends setting up what's called learning metrics. For example, how many customers signed up? Of those, how many became regular users? And what feedback are they giving that can drive your next development decisions? The key takeaway: don't just measure success by dollars in the bank. Measure it by how much you're learning, adapting, and improving your product. Chapter 4: Build, Measure, Learn Loop. Here we go. The heart of the Lean Startup methodology: the Build, Measure, Learn Loop. This is the cycle that drives everything forward. First, you build your MVP, or whatever experiment you're running. Then, you measure how users react. Do they like it? Are they using it the way you expected? Finally, you learn from those measurements and use that data to make changes or improvements. And then, guess what? You start the cycle again. It's a continuous loop of building, measuring, and learning, over and over until you've honed in on a product that truly resonates with your audience. The beauty of this system is that it keeps you flexible. You're not stuck with a rigid business plan that doesn't work. You're constantly evolving and improving based on real-world data. It's like being a sculptor. You start with a rough shape and slowly chip away until you've got something amazing. Certainly, here's an expanded version of Chapter 5: Pivot or Persevere, from the Lean Startup audiobook script, in a conversational tone, with more depth and examples. Chapter 5: Pivot or Persevere. Okay, so let's get into one of the toughest decisions any entrepreneur will face. Should you pivot, or should you persevere? I know this sounds a little dramatic, and in many ways, it is. This is a decision that can make or break your startup. Let's break it down. At its core, pivoting is all about recognizing that your current strategy or product isn't working the way you expected. Maybe your customers aren't responding as well as you'd hoped, or perhaps the market conditions have changed. When you pivot, you're not giving up on your startup altogether. Instead, you're making a significant shift in direction, sometimes small, sometimes big. This shift could be anything from changing your product features, your target audience, or even your entire business model. On the flip side, persevering is the decision to keep pushing forward, to refine and tweak what you've got because you believe it's still fundamentally solid. It's the belief that, despite the challenges, you're on the right track, and you just need more time or resources to see the success you're working toward. But here's the million-dollar question. How do you know when it's time to pivot, and when it's time to persevere? How do you make that call? Eric Ries gives us some guidance, and it starts with looking closely at the data. Let's walk through this. Assessing progress through the Build, Measure, Learn loop. First, we need to talk about the Build, Measure, Learn loop again because it plays a huge role in this decision. Every time you launch a version of your product, whether it's a full version or just an MVP, you're gathering data from real customers. That's the measurement part of the loop. This data should tell you whether you're making progress toward achieving your ultimate goal, finding product market fit. Product market fit is when your product resonates so strongly with your customers that they can't imagine living without it. It's the dream, right? But not every startup hits this right off the bat, and most don't. So, when you're in the thick of things, it's important to ask yourself, are you moving closer to product market fit? Or are you stuck? Are your customers giving you positive feedback? Are your key metrics improving? If the data shows you're moving forward, even if slowly, it might be worth persevering, keep refining what you have. But if the data shows stagnation, frustration, or that you're pouring more resources in with little improvement, it might be time to consider a pivot. The 3 A's: actionable metrics, vanity metrics, and what to ignore. Now, let's talk about the kind of data you should be looking at. Eric Ries emphasizes the difference between actionable metrics and vanity metrics. Actionable metrics give you real, useful information that you can use to make informed decisions. These might include things like your customer acquisition cost, how many users are converting into paying customers, or whether people are consistently using your product. Vanity metrics, on the other hand, are those shiny numbers that make you feel good but don't actually tell you much. For example, the total number of downloads for your app. Sure, it's nice to see a big number, but if those people aren't sticking around or engaging with your product, it doesn't matter. To make the pivot or persevere decision, you need to focus on actionable metrics. Are your customers giving you positive feedback? Are they using your product regularly? Are your key growth or engagement metrics heading in the right direction? These are the data points that matter when you're evaluating your progress. If these metrics aren't improving, despite your efforts, it's a red flag that something needs to change. That's when a pivot might be the best option. Examples of pivoting when it's the right call. Let me give you a few examples of successful pivots to illustrate this point. Take Instagram. Yep, one of the most popular social media platforms today. But did you know it wasn't always what it is now? Instagram actually started as a location-based app called Burb, where users could check in at places, plan meetups, and share photos. However, after testing their MVP, the founders realized that people weren't really using the app for its location-based features. Instead, they were only interested in one thing: sharing photos. That's when the team decided to pivot. They stripped away all the unnecessary features and focused entirely on photo sharing. And well, the rest is history. Another classic example is Slack. It began as a gaming company called TinySpec. And while the game didn't take off, the team had developed an internal communication tool that they were using for work. Realizing the potential of that tool, they pivoted entirely, creating what we now know as Slack, which became a game changer in workplace communication. What's the common thread in these stories? Both companies were able to listen to their customers, observe their behavior, and adjust accordingly. They weren't stuck on their original ideas. They pivoted when they realized their initial product wasn't quite right. This flexibility and willingness to change direction based on real data is what led to their ultimate success. Types of pivots. There are also different kinds of pivots you can make, depending on what your data is telling you. Let's run through a few common types. 1. Zoom-in pivot. This happens when a single feature of your product becomes more important than the whole product itself. So, you zoom in and focus just on that. Instagram did this with their photo sharing feature. 2. Zoom-out pivot. Sometimes, your product is too narrow, and you need to expand it to include additional features. This could mean taking a more holistic approach to solving your customers' problems. 3. Customer segment pivot. Maybe the product is fine, but you're marketing it to the wrong group of people. If you discover that a different group of customers is responding better, you can pivot your focus to that segment. 4. Business architecture pivot. You might realize that your business model isn't working. For instance, you might move from a high-margin, low-volume strategy to a low-margin, high-volume one, or vice versa, depending on what the market tells you. 5. Engine of growth pivot. This is when you switch the way you grow your business. For example, if you're relying on a viral growth model, but it's not working, You might switch to a paid growth model or a sticky growth model, where you focus on retaining users rather than acquiring new ones. The important thing to remember here is that pivoting isn't failure. In fact, in many cases, it's a necessary step toward success. It's about being flexible, learning from your customers, and being willing to change course when you realize something isn't working. When to persevere. Now, let's not forget the other side of the coin: persevering. Just because you're facing challenges doesn't always mean it's time to pivot. Sometimes, the right move is to push through, especially if the data shows that you're on the right track, but maybe just need more time or better execution. If your key metrics are improving, even slowly, and customers are responding positively, that's a sign you should keep going. Success doesn't always happen overnight, and many great startups have faced rocky moments before breaking through, but they kept refining, kept testing, and eventually got there. Ultimately, the decision to pivot or persevere comes down to one thing: learning. If you're learning and making progress toward product market fit, keep going. If you're not, don't be afraid to make that tough call and pivot. At the end of the day, it's not about sticking to your original plan. It's about building something people love, and sometimes that means changing direction. Sure, here's an expanded version of Chapter 6, Growth Engines, from the Lean Startup audiobook script. This version delves deeper into the three engines of growth: sticky, viral, and paid, providing more context, examples, and guidance for understanding these models. Chapter 6, Growth Engines. Alright, so we've talked about building a product, testing it with real users, and learning from their feedback. But once you've found product market fit, once you know that people love what you're offering, how do you grow? That's the big question, right? How do you take your startup from a small-scale operation to something much bigger without losing momentum? Eric Ries introduces three powerful growth engines in the Lean Startup: the sticky engine, the viral engine, and the paid engine. These aren't just abstract concepts. They're real strategies that successful startups use to fuel their growth. Each engine works differently, so part of your job as an entrepreneur is figuring out which one or combination of engines will drive your business forward. Let's dive into each of these engines and explore how they work, along with some real-world examples to bring them to life. 1. The sticky engine: building loyal customers. First up, we have the sticky engine. The sticky engine is all about customer retention, making sure the people who use your product stick around. After all, it's great to have people try your product, but if they leave after just a few uses, you've got a problem. Growth, in this case, is driven by how many users keep coming back. Here's how the sticky engine works. You focus on creating a product that's so valuable, so essential to your customers, that they can't imagine not using it. Think about some of the apps or services you use every day. Whether it's a to-do list app that you rely on for productivity or a favorite streaming service that keeps you entertained, these products have become sticky in your life. A great example of the sticky engine in action is Evernote. When Evernote first launched, it didn't focus on getting millions of users overnight. Instead, it focused on making sure the users it did have were deeply engaged with the product. It worked on making the app a central part of their daily routines, whether for note-taking, organizing, or saving important information. As users relied more and more on the app, they became loyal, long-term customers. That's the sticky engine in action. Now, how do you know if the sticky engine is right for your startup? Well, it depends on your product and your business model. If you're offering something that's meant to be used regularly, like a productivity tool, a subscription service, or even a game, you should focus on making it as sticky as possible. Look at key metrics like customer churn rate, the percentage of users who stop using your product over time. If you can reduce churn and keep more users around, that's how you'll grow with the sticky engine. 2. The viral engine: spreading like wildfire. Next, we've got the viral engine. Now, when you hear the word viral, you might think of memes, videos, or social media posts that get shared a million times. But in the context of startups, viral growth isn't just about being popular for a moment. It's about leveraging the power of your existing users to help bring in new ones without spending tons of money on advertising. With the viral engine, growth comes from word of mouth and network effects. The more users you have, the more new users they bring in, creating a self-sustaining loop. Each customer becomes an ambassador for your product, encouraging others to try it. Another example is Hotmail. When Hotmail launched in the mid-90s, it added a simple message at the bottom of every email sent from its platform. Get your free email at Hotmail. That tiny message spread like wildfire, and soon Hotmail had millions of users without spending a fortune on advertising. That's the viral engine at work. Now, how do you know if the viral engine is right for your startup? It works best if your product has built-in features that naturally encourage sharing or collaboration. Social networks, messaging apps, and platforms that rely on user interaction are prime candidates for viral growth. You'll know you're on the right track when your viral coefficient, the number of new users each existing user brings in, is greater than 1. That means each user is driving more than one additional user, and your user base will continue to grow exponentially. 3. The paid engine, fueling growth with money. Finally, let's talk about the paid engine. This one is pretty straightforward. You spend money to acquire customers. If you can spend less to acquire a customer than the amount that customer brings in over their lifetime, known as customer lifetime value, or CLV, then you've got a sustainable business model. It's a simple equation. You invest money in marketing, and as long as your revenue exceeds your acquisition costs, you can keep growing. The paid engine is common in industries where customers pay for a product or service upfront, or where there's a clear monetization strategy. Think of companies like Blue Apron or Dollar Shave Club. These subscription-based businesses rely heavily on paid advertising to bring in new customers. They spend money on Facebook ads, Google ads, or even TV commercials to attract people. But their key to success is making sure that the cost to acquire a customer or CAC is less than the revenue they'll make from that customer over time. Here's a great example: Grammarly. Grammarly offers a free product, but it also has a premium, paid version. They use a combination of paid search ads, social media ads, and content marketing to drive new users to their free product. Once users get hooked on the free version, many decide to upgrade to the premium offering, driving revenue growth. The paid engine can be incredibly powerful, but it comes with a warning: it can get expensive fast if you're not careful. That's why you need to keep a close eye on your acquisition costs and make sure they're in line with your revenue per customer. If your CAC is too high, it can eat into your profitability and make it hard to scale. One key metric to focus on with the paid engine is your lifetime value to customer acquisition cost ratio, LTV/CAC. Ideally, you want this ratio to be 3 to 1 or higher. That means for every dollar you spend acquiring a customer, you're making $3 in return. If your ratio is below this, you'll need to either lower your acquisition costs or increase your customer lifetime value to stay sustainable. Which engine is right for you? Now, you might be wondering, which engine of growth is right for my business? The answer depends on the type of product you're offering, your market, and how your customers behave. If you're building a product that users will come back to frequently, like a subscription service or an app they use daily, focus on the sticky engine and make sure your users are sticking around. If your product naturally lends itself to sharing or collaboration, the viral engine might be your best bet. Think about how you can create a viral loop where each user brings in more users. And if you have the resources to invest in marketing and a clear monetization strategy, the paid engine can help you scale quickly. As long as you're managing your acquisition costs wisely, the key is to pick the engine that makes the most sense for your business model and focus on optimizing it. You can combine growth engines, but each engine requires a different set of tactics and metrics. So you'll need to tailor your strategy accordingly, finding the right growth engine for your startup. In the end, growth isn't just about throwing money at ads or hoping your product goes viral. It's about finding the right engine of growth for your startup and then refining and optimizing it over time. Whether you're focused on retention, leveraging your users to drive more users, or paying for customer acquisition, what's most important is that you have a clear, sustainable path to growth. Each of these engines works, but the key is knowing which one aligns best with your product and your goals. Once you've identified your growth engine, focus your efforts, track your metrics, and keep learning as you go. That's how you build a startup that scales. So, are you ready to find your growth engine? Let's keep building. Conclusion. So there you have it, the Lean Startup. We've covered everything from the MVP to validated learning. the build, measure, learn loop, and how to make those tough decisions like pivoting or persevering. The lean startup approach is all about staying flexible, learning fast, and using data to drive your decisions. It's not about getting everything perfect the first time. It's about iterating quickly and building something that truly meets the needs of your customers. And remember, whether you're just starting out or already deep into your startup journey, the key is to keep learning and adapting. Every challenge is an opportunity to improve. Thanks for joining me in this audiobook. I hope you found it as valuable as I did. Now go out there and build something amazing.